Welcome to today's video looking at my 28mm late war Germans from Empress Miniatures. Now I bought these a number of years ago, and actually the batch that you see in front of you here I finished painting maybe 2 or more years ago, maybe even 3 years ago now. And it's a project that I very much enjoyed at the time, but haven't gone back to for various reasons. And as you can see, it's very different from other things that you may have seen on the channel before, because I went all in on doing winter-themed Volksgrenadiers using these very, very nice miniatures from Empress, sculpted by the very talented Paul Hicks. Now, as you can see, there's a collection of the different packs that are available. I have got more of these, particularly the individual figures that I just haven't got around to painting yet. But at the time, part of my attraction to doing the winter setup was I was very interested in some of the products that I'd seen and some of the effects that could be achieved using what in this video you can mainly see are AK interactive products of all different kinds. And so I particularly enjoyed getting the machine gun teams, as you can see here, both in the light machine gun role, deployed and moving. So there's a deployed example. And then behind here along the road, you've got a couple of teams that are moving. Another team that's deployed there. And then you've also got the static medium machine gun, sort of GPMG role on the tripod there as another example. And I like doing them because I was able to put them on these bases and basically create little dioramas, which I'm fond of for doing command bases and Napoleonics as well. But then the rest of the machine gun teams and the ordinary riflemen, etc., are all just on the regular little round bases, which is a bit harder to do. But as you can probably see, I spent quite a lot of time and effort on each of these, trying to work out ways to make the bases look real and compacted in places where the snow had iced, where it accumulated, clumped, where people may have walked before the people you can see on the bases are walking or moving, and also effects that made it look like if they've been in that position, how did they get there, what would the footprints look like and overlap, would there be any indications of them moving whilst they've been in the prone position. In that example, or over here with this machine gun team, you can see they've maybe been moving around to get the tripod into position. And it was quite an enjoyable process, really, although it was a bit long-winded, because you can't see that under that, I went through a long process of building up layers and putting in the indents and footprints using the sort of earth and mud and wet mud effects that you can get from AK Interactive first, before then starting to layer the snow on. And it took a long time to sort of go around the edges of the various prone figures and make sure that the layers and the levels and the mud fixed in properly, and it didn't look like they were too exposed or sat above the ground that they were on, so you didn't see any of the plinths that the miniatures have been sculpted on coming out underneath. And whilst along with the process, I was very, very pleased with the results. I mean, I look back at these now, and I'm still very happy with the way they look in terms of the footprint and some of the frozen water effects or the ice that I've decided to put in. And although it might not be hugely distinct on this, on some of them there's like accumulations of snow or slush on their boots behind them, or on their equipment. There's little light dustings as well. You might not be able to see it quite as well on all of these. Actually, here's maybe a decent example. You can see there crusting in on their equipment and where they may have lain or sat down and moved and so on, or in this case over here, you can see on the bottom around his boots and the bottom of his greatcoat coming out from underneath. So yeah, it was a very enjoyable process, and that part of that was a modelling exercise, because as you'll notice from looking at the whole group now, I think one of the barriers a lot of people find to doing winter-based wargaming is that it basically requires a whole extra collection in many cases, unless you're willing to dress the table using your existing sort of spring, summer, autumn stuff, and then maybe, I don't know, dust it somehow, or otherwise make it white. I mean, yeah, you could do the map. Everything else needs to look like it's a bit snowy, and these guys are looking particularly snowy, like they're trekking through, the deep Ardennes winter of 1944 in the sort of Bulge area, or January 45. And I think that's a barrier, because then it creates a sort of niche period of time or season during the year that you're trying to simulate, when most people tend to play games in pretty much every other season of the year. And to do so, for example, with trees and so on, if you're not going to dust them or find a way of snowing them that is going to create a mess, you're going to have bespoke terrain for that. And I think that is probably a barrier to entry, unless you particularly are into winter-themed games, or you think you can cross over your winter-themed terrain into other periods. But anyway, this is the collection as far as I got it to. I would like to get back to doing these. I particularly enjoyed doing them. Paul Hicks is an excellent sculptor and may have seen some of his other work for Empress Miniatures as well, particularly in their 28mm Vietnam range and for other companies besides that. But I really enjoyed them. They were very expressive. The poses, the equipment, the sculpting is all great detail, and the variety of packs. So as you can see here, I was able to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 machine gun teams. But I mean, there's 4 moving or deploying machine gun teams, 1 on a tripod. I'm pretty sure I had another moving machine gun team as well somewhere to do later on. But the diversity of the packs was and is excellent. So yeah, I pretty much enjoyed. Invested a lot of time into them. The one thing I will say, looking back at the figures now, is this batch here are probably my favourite ones because I hit on a way of doing the skin and faces and eyes and so on that I particularly liked. I've actually moved away from painting eyes now because it's so time consuming and difficult to get looking right, and can sometimes depend on the sculpt of the miniature you're looking at. Whereas some of the other figures I did when I first started doing them before refining them, the flesh came out a little bit indistinct, a little bit too pale, and some of the eyes that I did on the miniatures was sort of fine at the time. I look back on now and don't particularly like, and would probably go back and change if I went to complete this project. Whereas in the later batches are probably closer to techniques I use now, although my painting techniques have moved on again in the intervening time. And I was attempting to make it look like they were a bit cold and pale, as opposed to having a tan from running around in Italy or something like that. So I look back at these now and think at the time, well, yeah, I was really, really pleased with them. But like all of us, my sort of painting techniques and perhaps skill level have moved on, but I still very much like them. And there's something very, very evocative about the winter theme, and actually putting time into thinking about like the arrangement of little dioramas like this, or how you're going to use the bases to set off the miniatures. Because I discussed in one of my other videos, for example, that sometimes miniatures look a bit, not dull, but somehow just not set off on certain types of basing. And so thinking about a complementary basing scheme that also fits into whatever season is going to be important, just to give you that finishing touch. So you feel like you're satisfied with the all-round impression of the miniature. And if it's, for example, light base, it's going to uplight them. For example, on these, all that white snow is definitely going to create light bouncing off the bottom and uplight them in such a way as they don't look as perhaps dark and dull in their camouflage patterns as they might otherwise do. But yeah, so that's the Empress Miniatures collection with the little cameo from that Rubicon Panzer IV at the back. If anybody was interested in getting into this sort of late war, winter, autumn type, these miniatures are excellent. I would definitely highly recommend them. And I've seen people do very excellent versions of them in sort of that slightly more temperate environments and seasons, parts of the year that aren't winter, that are like autumn and muddy and stuff. And some really talented examples of using them for different units as well. So, for example, using them for different Waffen-SS units and things like that, because they're a blank canvas at the end of the day. You can tailor them to all sorts of things. But in my case, I just went for sort of generic late war infantry / Volksgrenadiers. Among these miniatures and the ones that I've got yet to paint, there's quite a balance of the classic STG 44 and things like that. And one day I do hope to get back to them. The only problem with that is that then I would have to probably spend quite a lot of time painting a complementary winter force to oppose them. So we'll see. We'll see where this project goes. But I thought it was worth getting out to show something different to that that's normally on the channel, which is sort of generic spring-summer-based troops from various different periods of time. Anyway, that's all I have to say about these for now. If you've got any questions about any of the way I went about any of the modelling for them, how I went about the bases in perhaps more detail, or any questions like that, please let me know in the comments below. And if you think that it would be worth me investing a lot of time finishing up this collection and then getting them some opposition in the winter table, let me know that too. Or if you've done such a project and you found an easy way of mixing that time, expense and need to store things into your existing collection in an efficient way, let me know, because that would definitely encourage me to invest heavily in this winter style wargaming setup. For example, I have had an idea once on doing a sort of winter of 1812 type project using Perry miniatures. But anyway, let me know if you've ever tried a winter project like this, how it's worked out for you, what you think of how I've done the sort of basing theme and snow effects for this. And in the meantime, happy hobbying.